Hello and welcome. It's Francis here. Thank you for coming back to my channel. If this is your first time here, I bid thee welcome. There is a subscribe button below if you would like to help support this channel by subscribing. Also a bell to be notified when I upload more content. I'm coming to you from Ghana country, and as such, I acknowledge the Ghana people of the Adelaide Plains as being the traditional custodians of the land upon which I reside. So if you have watched my new moon video, I did mention Black Moon Lilith. She will be playing a part in this new moon as part of the fixed grand cross, and I'll put a link to the video below. But this video, I thought I'll just sort of unpack a little bit more about Black Moon Lilith. I've sort of used some videos from Molly McCord as a guide, a reference point, because she is the astrologer. I am not, so please check out Molly's videos below as well. So Black Moon Lilith, she is currently moving through Scorpio. She entered Scorpio on the 27th of March and will eventually leave around about the 20th of December this year. So that's some 8 months. And if you have a copy of your birth chart, your natal chart, take a look to see what house Scorpio is in, because this is the area in your life that's going to be activated during this time, especially at this upcoming new moon, which will be here in Adelaide on the 28th of April, other parts in the world on the 27th. And as I said, she'll be forming part of this fixed grand cross. Later in the year, in September and also November, she will be part of 2 water trines. And Molly McCord talks more about these in her videos. So Lilith herself takes some 9 years to move through the entire astrological wheel. And there is actually a degree of significance to her journey. But before we look at that, it's probably best to explain what is Black Moon Lilith. And in this particular instance, it's best to sort of clarify what I'm talking about, considering there are 4 Liliths that can be found within astrology. However, what we're looking at here is a point that is related to the lunar apogee, or this is the point where the moon is in the darkest part of the sky because it's furthest away from the Earth. So it's a calculation point more than anything. So it's not a planet or an asteroid, it's just a calculation point. However, it means that these energies tend to be more wild and primal, more instinctual, and also rather free, not constrained, rather like how Lilith appears in myth. And according to the Hebraic mythology, Lilith was Adam's first wife, his equal. However, she refused to submit to him after a disagreement, and God sort of took side of Adam. So she took off to the Red Sea, where, according to the story, she coupled with demons. And after God sent some angels to bring her back to the Garden of Eden, she blatantly refused. So she was cursed, shall we say, so that all the children that she would bring forth would die. And then this sort of moves into more of the folkloric traditions that she has sort of morphed into a demon that goes after children, or especially newborns. She needs to be protected, especially for a woman who's in the process of giving birth. But there is a much older story about Lilith coming from ancient Mesopotamia, and here she appears as Lilitu, or the screech owl. And as Lilitu, she inhabited the sacred hoopla tree, which Inanna herself cut down in order to make a throne out of. So when Lilitu was without a home, lost her house, so to speak, she became Inanna's handmaiden. And it's really interesting because I do have it in my Dark Goddess book from my research, I haven't come across any reference to her of actually being depicted as a goddess, especially in the concept of how we identify deity. But that doesn't or hasn't stopped her becoming one, because in this modern age, she very much represents a goddess of empowerment, and especially regaining empowerment through sexuality or anything to do with sexual hang-ups and issues, in particular with women. But when I work with darker deities, in particular the goddesses, I feel that they can work for anyone. So that's a little bit of a background to Lilith. So when we come back to Black Moon Lilith, there are actually two ways of calculating this point that may be in your chart, or find out where it is in your chart. That's unless you use a computer program, which is what I do. The first is where she oscillates between retrograde and direct, and this point is known as H13. There's a second point, which is the mean or the average, and that's known as H12. And then there's also an asteroid known as Lilith. And this asteroid orbits between Mars and Jupiter and is known as 1181. But Black Moon Lilith, this calculation point, is also known as Wandermuth, named after its discoverer. And if you put it into a computer program, it may come up as H58, H58. So those are the four Liliths that can appear in astrology. Okay, coming back to Black Moon Lilith itself. She was last in Scorpio in 21st of May 2016, and she exited 17th of February 2017. So that was from 8 years ago. So maybe pause for a moment, and can you think of what was happening in your life back then? Because Lilith tends to connect you to your own underworld. And this is done through your emotional power and strength, as well as levels of deep enlightenment. Not to mention areas where maybe you have been resisting due to the thought of them being taboo or forbidden or even overtly erotic. As I said, there is this sort of sexuality connected in with Lilith. And she also has a rather addictive nature, especially when she's in Scorpio, as well as extreme emotions, and can also connect into what has been denied from you in your experiences. So she's all about those sort of pushing the boundaries. When we look at Scorpio, Scorpio is a fixed water sign, and saying that it spans the whole spectrum itself of the emotions, including our fears. So when we've got this expansion or across the spectrum of emotions and fears, meeting Black Moon Lilith, these are the energetics that enable us or sort of take us down into a deep dive into our subconscious, see what's there. And this could actually be a very intense journey that you're needing to embark upon in your own way without sort of giving thought to traditional societal standards or expectations. To also bring up a challenge in stereotypes, in control mechanisms, even power dynamics that maybe you hadn't realized. So if you have your natal chart where Scorpio is, the house that it rules in your chart, this could actually give you more of an idea where maybe you might be feeling a little bit more intuitive and really wanting to make some serious changes in your life And this feeling, this desire to make these changes is coming from either a higher force or a deeper place within your own being. So as Black Moon Lilith returns to this area in your chart, she could very well stir up what you're ready to face now and what's calling to you from a deeper place, even showing up in ways of how you can incorporate more of your intuitive self, your emotional body, and also those intense energetics that really cannot be denied. Scorpio is about merging. It's about the integration of these intense emotions that have risen up from our shadows. Scorpio wants us to go deeper, to understand more about what's being experienced within. Scorpio is the soul investigator, so to speak, and may or may not involve another person. It could be triggered by another person, or it could be just us wanting to dive into us. But it's also about deep and permanent transformation and evolution, especially at a level where it requires death and rebirth, so to speak. So we're talking about a spiritual death and rebirth, a death of sort of the old way, the old self, and then the rebirth of the new self, a new way of being, a new way of perceiving things in our world, a new way of living your life, coming back to your true power. Because the essence of Black Moon Lilith is one of the fearless feminine. And yes, she has a lot of feminine energy, where she is the wild feminine, so to speak. This does not mean that men or people who do not identify with any gender can't work with her, or will not be feeling this energy. She attacks, already stop there. She will be rising up in your chart no matter how you identify, or what you identify or don't identify as. She's in everybody's chart because she is about sovereignty. She calls for us to truly stand in our own power and not be dependent on other people. And she's asking us to consider, or she's challenging us to think, what do we believe? Or what do you believe? What are your core values and traits? She's demanding almost for us to stop looking at other people for validation and to truly believe in our own self, to trust our own judgment, even if this may go against those around us, our peers, our family. She's asking us to come back to us. And it can be very uncomfortable, especially if you've not been allowed to embrace your own truth, your own power before. And I find it really interesting because here in Australia, we're in the final weeks of an election, of the sort of campaign trail. So yes, she's calling for us to make our own decision, to sort of cut through all that sort of political window dressing, so to speak, and really make our own decision. She also exists outside the boundary of the modern world. So she's a bit like a guide back to a more ancient primordial part of our being. So like really pulling back the layers to soul, true soul self, so that we can reconnect and therefore emerge once more when we are reborn. And she's with us all the way. She is like a psychopomp guiding us through the darkness. And currently, well, today, actually, the 26th of April, when I'm recording this, there's a direct opposition, exact opposition between Mars, which is at 3 degrees of Leo, and Pluto at 3 degrees of Aquarius. and they're in direct opposition. So there's a bit of a power struggle happening. And Lilith, Black Moon Lilith, is also at 3 degrees this time of Scorpio. And it's interesting because Scorpio is ruled by both Mars and Pluto. I find that interesting. And as her energy is unexpected, there could be power plays, especially as the power sort of moves and is involved and coupled in this intensity between Mars and Pluto already. And it's building up because these are all fixed signs. So we've got Mars in Leo. Leo's a fixed sign. Pluto in Aquarius is a fixed sign. Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio, which is a fixed sign. And we've got the upcoming sun and a full or new moon will be in Taurus, which is a fixed sign. And these are fixed patterns, fixed routines. But Black Moon Lilith is in there almost as if she's providing us with the strength or the insight into what is no longer working for us, what needs to be changed, what has been shaken up with the eclipse season that we've just gone through. And Black Moon Lilith can actually help us break these patterns, maybe face the fears that we need to maybe surrender in order to overcome our fear once and for all. And then later in the year, as I mentioned, September and November, she will be in water grand trines with Jupiter and the North Node. And Molly McCord talks more about these in her videos below. So there's big growth actually happening, bring this back to a more individual level, in the Scorpio area of your chart. And this will be emerge completely by November, or by the end of November. And Black Moon Lilith is presenting herself, as I said, as a guide, as a psychopomp, as we are all being challenged to sort of explore these in the depths of our own self to see what's there. Now, I find this really interesting because over on my Mystical Soul Academy website on the 1st of May or the 30th of April, depending on where you are in the world, I will be starting Embracing the Shadows, Rebirthing the New, which is a 7-part deep soul dive. And I hadn't actually considered Black Moon Lilith when I was setting the date for this. But we will be starting this Thursday or this Wednesday, depending on where you are in the world. There's still time to sign up. And it's consisting of 7 modules, which I will just go through all of this information very quickly because you can come back and read it at your leisure. The 7 modules that are held on a fortnightly basis are all recorded if you can't attend live. And we start off with preparing for the descent. So we're looking at the first part of the descent of the goddess, the Inanna story, as she prepares herself to go into the underworld. So we prepare ourselves as we begin to enter the 7 gates into the underworld, into the great below, into our own shadow self. In module 2, we take another look at another descent journey, and that is from the Greek myth of Kore or Persephone and Demeter. And we're looking at the transformation of innocence from Kore, as she also descends into the underworld. In module 3, we take a look at the Hindu myth surrounding Kali Ma, and my personal favorite deities to be working with. And she's getting a little bit intense because Kali calls us, asks us, demands of us to surrender our ego, to embrace the fear, the change that is needed so that this can be integrated into our lives. We return to the Persephone myth in module 4, because I did think that it's important to sort of look at these two aspects of this one story in its totality and really explore what transition Persephone goes through as she steps into her own power as queen of the underworld, and how we can take that as a guide and embrace our own authentic self. Who are we really when we have removed our connections away from other people? Module 5 is another releasing as we remove the mask and we are guided by Medusa. Looking at the roles that we play, the expectations. We also undertake a journey that's very much like the shamanic soul retrieval. Because often if we go through trauma as children, these parts of ourselves go somewhere else. So what sort of continues on in this existence is not our true self. It's not a complete puzzle. So we're going to find and retrieve these missing pieces of our own jigsaw. Module 6, we're looking at ghosts from the family path. So intergenerational trauma that's come down through our DNA, and it's not necessarily immediate. It can be a number of generations looking at why we do certain things the way that we do them, because often it usually has always been that way. And then we undertake a sacred ceremony where we cleanse and purify and help remove any negative energies, blockages, attachments through our whole intergenerational line, bringing us back into balance with our ancestors. Also exploring what ancestors mean as well. Then finally in module 7, we've done all the deep soul work in the shadows. It's now time to emerge once more and integrate this into the new self. This is our rebirthing process, is what I mentioned in earlier in relation to Black Moon Lilith. There is this death and this rebirth. This is our rebirth, and this is where the work really begins as we begin to integrate everything that we have learnt so we can carry on in the new way in our day-to-day lives. So all this information is on mysticalsoulacademy.com/embrace shadows. Put the link below if you are interested. As said, it will be starting on the 1st of May or the 30th of April, depending on where you are in the world. There is still time to sign up. And every module is recorded. And even if you do miss the first module, you will still get all the recordings sent out to you. So that's a little bit about Black Moon Lilith. And I said, look back to 8 years ago as to what was happening in your life then. Have a look at your natal chart to see where Scorpio is. And that could actually give some clues as to where things may start to intensify. And especially, so we've got the direct opposition between Mars and Pluto happening today. And in a few days' time, we will also have that new moon. So it's a good time to sort of pause, consider things, and breathe. Blessings.